Hello, and welcome to another episode of DobberProspects Radio. We're back with episode number 44, the Brian Fogarty number edition. I'm your host, Peter Harling. Thanks for tuning in, and hope you enjoy the show. Straight up off the top, we're going to do a little announcements about what's coming up on the site, the Dobber Prospects. There's some great content up there right now. Yoki Nevalainen has been pumping out some pretty great stuff. I was happy to have contributed to his top 60 fantasy hockey goalie rankings. It's a consensus article, not unlike some of the other articles we've done before, like the organizational rankings and fantasy ranking draft. So Yoki was a contributor to that, and he invited managing editor Cam Robinson and myself to contribute. I'll give you the Twitter handles for everyone that contributed to this article. So Yoki's is JOKKENEVALAINEN. Cam's is at Hockey Robinson. Pat Quinn is one of the managing editors. He was a contributor as well, at FHP Quinn, just like the coach. Keith Duggan, our Arizona writer, at KDUGGAN 92. Tony Carr is our Chicago Blackhawks contributor, at 5 Minute Major. Lucas Main, who I believe is covering Goalie Guild for us right now, at LAM1926. He's our Ducks writer. And Chris Legg at LEGG06. And last but not least, Brayden Olofson also contributed at OLAF1393. A little bit of news about Brayden. He is going to be working with me a little bit behind the scenes on the podcast, a little bit, helping me with some of the technical stuff, as I'm a little bit challenged in that regards. He'll also be looking at getting some episodes posted on YouTube as well. If you're able to access YouTube at work, that might be something that you'd be interested in doing. I don't think we're going to have any sort of video support going along with this, as I have a face for radio, as they say. And also, Brayden has started his contributions on the main Dobber hockey site as taking over. Another NHL drafted player that scored the final series-winning goal, Dmitry Zagorodny, is a Calgary Flames draft pick. He had a pretty impressive tournament as well, playing for Russia. He's also from the Q. I talked a little bit about Stepan Starkov. He led the tournament, 6 games. He had 6 points, 2 goals, and 4 assists. He is a free agent, undrafted player, so you may not be able to add him in any of your fantasy leagues right now. but certainly a player you might want to think about putting on your watch list in case he signs as a free agent at some point. Another player that had an impressive tournament and set a record for Russia, actually, as the first ever player as a defenseman to score 5 points in the tournament. That's Savely Olshensky. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name wrong. Please forgive me. He had 1 goal and 4 assists for 5 points. He scored the final goal. I think it was in overtime to wrap the series up. He had a pretty strong series. He's got decent size, skates well, moves the puck well, obviously with his 5 points. Another Russian player that really caught my attention was, I think his name is pronounced Peter, Pyotr Kochkov, the goalie, the other goalie. Daniel Tarasov was one. He's also a drafted prospect. Kochkov is a free agent goalie, and he just kind of dominated. He went 3-0, had a shutout. At least 1 shutout, maybe even 2. 0.67 goals against and 978 save percentage. He was pretty lights out, blanking the OHL in the game that I watched, making great saves, making easy saves, and just not really giving the OHL much to work with. The defense in front of him played pretty strongly as well. You got to give credit where credit is due, but to get a shutout in a tournament that has that much star power in a game is very impressive. Getting a little bit back to the Dobber site, another article posted recently by Yoki that I think you might find interesting is a consolidated draft rankings. So he took the draft rankings from several outlets, including our own Cam Robinson's, as well as a friend of the podcast, Steve Kornianis, the draft analyst. If anyone listening to the show isn't familiar with Steve yet, by all means, give him a follow on Twitter at the Draft Analyst. His podcast is one of my favorites. I'm a big fan of Steve's work. Give him a follow. Check out his blog. Craig Button, they also used his rankings and rankings from future considerations to get a consensus overall ranking. I would also encourage you to take a look at some of my other favorite prospect draft rankings. HockeyProspect.com, of course, the industry leader in independent scouting. These guys are the cream of the crop when it comes to ranking draft eligible prospects. They're basically like an NHL team. They've got scouts all over, and this is what they do. It's all they do is rank draft eligible prospects. They're highly respected, and they actually go to games and watch hockey. McKean's is another great outlet. I've written for McKean's, friends with Ryan Wagman, who takes care of the prospects for them there. So I'd highly recommend checking out both hockeyprospect.com and mckeanshockey.com. And of course, former guests on the show, Sam Cosentino and Jeff Merrick, also do their prospect rankings for Sportsnet. I have a lot of respect for those guys' opinions. So those are some great places to look for draft rankings. Cam's latest draft rankings are up on the site as well. So be sure to check those out. Moving along, thanks for listening, everyone. It's been a little bit inconsistent with episodes since the summer, to say the least, but I appreciate everybody who has been sending me messages on Twitter, encouraging me to make more episodes. It makes it a lot easier to put these episodes out, and thanks to Brayden for helping me get some things sorted out technically as well. Don't forget, you can follow this on iTunes. Please feel free to give us a review, a little 5-star review. Leave a comment if you'd like. That would be amazing. You can also now follow us on Spotify. I added the podcast to Spotify on the last episode and seen some pretty impressive results there. So if you have Spotify, please do look us up there. We're also on Stitcher, TuneIn, SoundCloud, a whole bunch of places. If there's anywhere that we're not and you'd like us to post there, shoot me a message. I'll see if I can make that happen. And also you can, in the future, probably find us on YouTube. More on that to follow as Brayden gets a little bit more ingrained in the show. All right. Next up, I'm going to do a little bit of talk about players you might want to look at on the waiver wire. Last week I gave you a bunch of names, or last episode I should say, I gave you a bunch of names. One of them, I hope you were listening and you took note, Drake Batherson. He was off to a torrid scoring pace in the AHL, his first year in the A as a rookie. Made it impossible for the Sens to ignore. They called him up, and lo and behold, he scored a goal in his first game. A pretty nice goal, too, by the way, off the draw. And he has, I think, 3 points in 2 games in only 11 minutes and 30 seconds of time on ice. His AHL season, he was 5th overall in the league right now, despite having been in the NHL for about a week. 14 games, 20 points, 7 goals, 13 assists. Drake Batherson is only 30% Fantrax owned, so if you were sleeping on him after last week's episode, if he's still available in your league, and at 30%, that's a staggeringly low number, I would make sure I went out and picked him up on waiver wire, add him to your roster. You don't even need to stash him on your bench. You can put him right into your roster. He's putting up points. All right, let's look at a couple of goalies who are available. I'm thinking about adding a goalie in the DPFHL. I've got Brayden Olofson. He's been a little injured, and not much else after that that's able to contribute. So I'm looking for a goalie market myself. One player who I noticed was called up recently that would be a cheap ad, minor eligible, entry-level contract, Edward Pascal for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Andrei Vasilevskiy is out with a foot fracture, so he'll have an opportunity to stick with the Bolts for a while. He'll be backing up, however. In 7 games in the AHL, he's got a .285 goals against average and an .896 save percentage. So don't look for much more than him than the occasional spot start with average to garden variety numbers. However, Tampa Bay is a pretty good team. Even if he's not a very good goalie, he still has an opportunity to get to the W, even if he lets in a few goals. Another goalie who might be a little bit more intriguing would be Cal Peterson of the Los Angeles Kings. He is only 19% Fantrax owned. He made his NHL debut recently versus Chicago, and he had 35 shots, made 34 saves. He's a 1-1 record with a .228 goals against average, .935 save percentage. So Cal Robinson was previously a property of the Buffalo Sabres. They drafted him, and I believe he finished out his college career and became a free agent and signed with Los Angeles. I think that was the conditions in which he became a free agent. Anyways, he blew town on Buffalo and signed in LA for a better opportunity, apparently. And he's getting his shot in the NHL now. He's a pretty good goalie. He'll be ranked in the top 60 that we just put out on DobberProspects that I mentioned in this segment previously. 2 weeks ago, or last episode, I talked about 2 other prospects, Lawrence Pilote and Sheldon Rempel. Those are 2 prospects that I'm going to mention them again really quickly because they are on the rise. And Lawrence Pilote is only 9% Fantrax owned, and Sheldon Rempel is only 4% Fantrax owned. Both are still playing in the AHL currently, but Lawrence Pilote is the leading scorer for the defenseman. He's got 22 points in 15 games. Again, if you were sleeping on him last week, what are you waiting for? He's amazing. Sheldon Rempel, another college player, undrafted, signed as a free agent by Los Angeles as well. He's tearing up the AHL. He had a cup of coffee in the NHL and he didn't score any points in the 3 games that he played, but he's got 15 points in 11 games in the A. A couple more players that I didn't talk about last week. Let's look at the Charlotte Checkers. Carolina Hurricanes prospect Jani Kukkonen is on fire. He has played 17 games, and he's got 19 points, 8 goals. 11 of his points have come on the power play, so he's producing pretty evenly, even strength and power play, so that bodes well. He's not dependent on the power play to produce his points, and he can produce on the power play, which is something that NHL teams covet. He's 20 years old, so he's in his rookie year in the AHL, and he's just looking great. I think he's not long for a call-up and a look in the NHL. Another player, and this one is a bit of a reach. He is only 1% Fantrax owned, and he's probably a player you've never heard of. His name is Brooks Maciek. He's a center for the Vegas Golden Knights. So he'll be playing with, I believe, their AHL affiliate is Chicago. Vegas signed him as a free agent to a two-way, one-year contract. He's 26 years old, so he's not exactly a kid anymore. He's got lots of pro seasoning, and he's tearing up the AHL. He's third overall in scoring. He was originally drafted by the Detroit Red Wings in 2010. He was a sixth-round pick. Never played anything for Detroit. Played all his time in Europe. After a breakout season last year, Vegas got caught wind of him. He made it on their radar, and they signed him and brought him over. So his point totals are, he's leading the AHL with goals, actually. He has 14 goals in 16 games and only 7 assists. So 21 points in 16 games. Third overall in scoring, first overall in goals. That kind of production gets noticed. He would definitely be someone who I think you could sneakily put on your watch list, maybe even add him onto your roster. If he gets an opportunity to come up in the NHL and start scoring at even close to the pace he's at in the AHL, that would be pretty amazing. All right, that's it for your waiver wire players to look for this week. Talk a little bit about maybe some more in the next segment here as I look at answering your questions. If you got a question for the DPR show, shout it out. Send it to our Twitter account at DPR_show. Hashtag DPR if you want. You can shoot it right to me, Peter Harling, at pharling, PHARLING. Either way, shoot it to me. I'll see if I can't answer your question and get it on the show. So this week's questions. First up is Dobber Prospects, Senior Managing Editor, Associate Editor, Hayden Soboleski. He asks me, who are the risers and fallers of the 2018 draft? Well, Hayden, a little early to be calling people risers and fallers with any sort of confidence, but I'll give you some players who right off the bat have jumped out at me as an answer here. So a couple kind of slam dunk obvious ones. Kotkaniemi with Montreal Canadiens. I think there was a lot of question about whether or not they overreached and took him ahead of other players that they shouldn't have. If they made a mistake picking him because he's a center over other players who were better that played in different positions. I think they took a lot of heat, especially from some Habs fans, specifically Habs fans that have never seen Kotkaniemi play. Now that they've seen him play, because he's made the team, he's in the NHL, he's looking pretty good. So I'm not sure if he's exceeding Montreal's expectations, but I think it's safe to say that he's exceeding most of the fans' expectations, including my own. So congratulations to Montreal. That turns out to be looking like a good pick so far. So far, so good. The next one with fourth overall pick was Brady Tkachuk to the Ottawa Senators. He is not exceeding my expectations, but I think he's exceeding some. He's come into Ottawa's roster and he's just he's doing everything. He's putting up points. He's playing that Tkachuk gritty style. I think he's exactly what the Senators need. A player that has some passion, a little bit of sandpaper, as I said. I own him in my fantasy league, so I'm pretty happy about how he's doing. He had an injury, but he came back way early, so that was also a pleasant surprise. Moving down a little bit, Ty Smith is another player who I think is on the rise after his draft. He's drafted by New Jersey, 17th overall. He was returned to his WHL team this season, Spokane. He's playing there as their captain this year. And this little undersized defenseman is off to a torrid scoring pace with 31 points in 20 games. And remember, he's a defenseman. So I'm not sure that makes him a riser, as this isn't new, but it's certainly impressive. Another defenseman who has been impressive would be Toronto Maple Leafs' Rasmus Sandin. The 18-year-old was able to be assigned to the AHL, so rather than send him back to the Sioux in the OHL or let him go home and play in Europe, they were able to get him to go and play pro hockey with their AHL affiliate in Toronto, the Marlies. He's also a defenseman, and he's played 7 games so far. He's got 5 points. I think that's pretty impressive for an 18-year-old rookie defenseman in a super hard league like the AHL. that's more than I would have expected. I'm just surprised he's able to make the AHL, let alone find an offensive production. Looking at a couple of fallers, I had a harder time with fallers because players who are drafted early in the draft go back to their original league they were drafted from. They tend not to have a dip in production. And or if they move from like junior or college to pro hockey, there's an adjustment period, and I think it's too soon to be calling players fallers or busts. But that being said, I'll give you two. 15th overall, Grigory Denisenko, picked by the Florida Panthers. He played 15 games in the KHL this year. He was only able to manage 3 points and has made his way back down to the Russian Junior League, the MHL. So a bit of a demotion there. I'm not saying he's a bust or this is a red flag of any kind, but I had to come up with someone, so this is what I got. Another one would be 24th overall pick by Minnesota Wild, Philip Johansson. Perhaps a bit of a stretch where they picked him to begin with, but he only has 1 assist in 17 games playing in Allsvenskan in Sweden, which is not as difficult a league as the SHL or the KHL or the AHL. It's a junior league, and 1 point in 17 games. Not sure what his game projects to be at the NHL, but it's certainly not fantasy relevant, and this is a fantasy prospect podcast, so I'm going with him. All right, thanks for the question, Hayden. Next up, William Henney at William Henney 44 asks me for my thoughts on Iilya Mikheyev. Is he worth adding? Well, William, who exactly is Iilya Mikheyev is the first question I think I need to answer for our listeners. He is a undrafted free agent playing in the KHL. He is in the last year of his contract and will be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. He's currently 28th overall in KHL scoring. In 28 games played, he's got 11 goals and 10 assists for 21 points. He is a 24-year-old, 6'2", 194-pound forward. So, is he worth adding? Well, first of all, like I mentioned earlier, in most fantasy hockey leagues, you can't add a player to your roster until his NHL rights are owned, either via draft or free agency. So I think that precludes and eliminates most leagues' ability to add him at this point. You can certainly add him to your Fantrax watch list and keep an eye on him in case he should sign and end up on an NHL team at the end of this season. I know that there is plenty of NHL interest in adding established players who are mature and can come over and contribute to the roster right away. Everyone is looking for the next Artemi Panarin. I'm not saying that this guy is going to be the Artemi Panarin or if he's even interested in coming over to the NHL. There seems to be some debate about that. So I guess the answer to your question is I would put him on my watch list and wait until find out what his intentions are if he plans on coming. If he signs an NHL contract, then he intends on coming. And at that point, I would be quick to move on him, either adding him as a free agent or drafting him early. The way the Dobber Prospects League works, that players that are signed after our trade deadline, so college free agents or European free agents, we're not able to add them because we're in our playoffs, and they just go into the draft. So our draft every year consists of entry-level players and recently signed free agents. So he's a player who I would put at the high on my list, on my draft list in those circumstances, should he sign. All right, so the next question comes from Bill Kahn at Bottlenecker93. Hey, Bill. So Bill asked me, likelihood we see almost NHL-ready guys like Drake Batherson, Dylan Sikura, or Henrik Borgstrom. And as you probably demised already, that this question was asked me about a week ago, right before Drake Batherson was recalled to the Ottawa Senators. So that one obviously goes without saying. Now, in terms of Sikura and Borgstrom, I would say, there's a really good opportunity or potential, I would say, that those players get an opportunity to play in the NHL. Both are highly valued prospects, top prospects in their organization. So Dylan Sikura, if you're unfamiliar, comes from NCAA, where he dominated for several years, able to sign with Chicago at the end of last year. So far this season, he's played his entire season in the AHL with their affiliate, 18 games, 13 points. So that's pretty impressive. Chicago having gone through a coaching change and as a team that has had some disappointments lately, missing playoffs, early exits from playoffs. I think they're a team that is entering a transition phase and will be looking at, okay, what do we have with our top prospects? I think it'd behoove them to give him at least a cup of coffee or two in the NHL at some point this season. Once they feel that he has made the adjustment to pro hockey, offensively he obviously has. He's producing just great, but I haven't had a chance to watch him play at all. So I'm not sure where his defensive or physical game is at right now. But once he gets those under control, I think you'll see him in the NHL probably sooner than later for a short look at the very least, if not for the rest of the season. The other player you mentioned was Henrik Borgstrom, Florida Panthers prospect, also coming out of college. 14 games, 14 points, 4 goals, 10 assists. Similar scenario to Sakura. I would not be surprised to see him come up soon. Florida, however, is not exactly a team on the rebuild. They're a team that's looking to take the next step from being competitive to a contender. If he can contribute to that, then of course they will make space for him. But I would say there's greater opportunity for Sakura between the two of them. And not that you asked, but here's a couple other names that you might want to look at along the same vein. Yanni Kukkonen, who I spoke about just a little bit ago. Troy Terry, the real American shootout hero. Anaheim Ducks had a cup of coffee at the start of the season. Was sent back down to the AHL, where he's been on fire since he got there, scoring at a torrid pace. Jordan Greenway, Minnesota Wild prospect. He's, out of all the NHL drafted prospects playing in the AHL, he leads in points per games at 2. He's going to be a fantasy beast. He'll have some offensive ability, put him in front of the net on the power play, and he'll be a force to be reckoned with. He'll give you lots of hits as well as peripheral stats, block shots and whatnot, penalty minutes. So Jordan Greenway is someone who's going to be in the NHL sooner than later. Andrew Mangiapane, Calgary Flames prospect, is also high on the points per game list for NHL drafted players playing in the AHL. I would not be surprised if the Flames at some point gave him a look. And Alex Nylander, Williams' brother, I spoke about him on the last episode as well. I think a lot of people are seeing his value as a declining asset, struggling to make it out of the AHL. I gave you my thoughts on that last episode, and that I think it's way too soon to pull the plug on him. I think this is a potentially good buy low opportunity with this prospect, and I would be looking at adding him, as I think the Buffalo might give him a look at some point as well. All right, thanks for the question, Bill. Next up is another friend of the show, Stephen Butland. SBUTLAND is his Twitter handle. You can also find Stephen on his own hockey podcast, fantasy hockey podcast, no less. It's called Hockey Dummies Podcast. I had to listen to their episode 8 today and loved it. It was good stuff. I don't think Stephen was on that episode, but give them a follow as well, at Hockey Dummies. So just a little shout out to a friendly podcast. Anyways, Stephen's question is, Paul Bittner, do I think he gets a sniff next year? That's a very good question, Stephen. So Paul Bittner is 22 years old. He's in his 3rd AHL season, so he's a prospect by my definition. But he's not a young kid anymore. He's had 2 mediocre sort of AHL seasons, and this season he's shown improvement. Call it a breakout, if you will. For him, 15 games so far anyways. He's got 2 goals and 9 assists for 11 points, which is pretty decent production. Where I think the likelihood that he gets a look at next year is it's time to kind of poop or get off the pot with this player. This is his last year of waivers eligibility, so if he doesn't get any NHL time this year, in order for them to reassign him back down to the minors next year, he'll have to clear waivers. So I think it's very likely that if he keeps playing at the rate that he is right now, that he'll get an NHL recall just so they can see how he looks, give him an NHL debut. Where is he at? Is this a player that they can afford to put on waivers? Will he clear? Do they have an appetite for that kind of a risk? He's got 1 year left on his contract after this, but this is his last year of waiver eligibility, I believe. So, do I think he gets a sniff next year? Absolutely. Without question, if he has any chance of playing in the NHL, they'll certainly give him a sniff and then hold on to him later into the season as teams' rosters get a little bit more flushed out. It's less likely he gets claimed off waivers as teams are crunching to get their roster down to a manageable size. He's way more likely to clear waivers in early October. All right, last question goes to Leo Reyes at SEYERPA is his Twitter handle. And he asked me quite simply, Broberg versus Byram. So these are 2018 NHL Draft eligible prospects, and haven't got a lot of experience watching these players play as they're in Europe in the dub, and I'm in Ontario. However, I did defer to Yoki's consensus draft ranking article, and Byram was ranked 6th overall, whereas Broberg was ranked 13th overall. So I'm just going to default to that list. They're both defensemen. They both have decent size. They're both transitional defensemen, good skaters. However, I think that's a pretty big separation, 6th to 13th. So while I haven't seen much of these players play, gonna have to go with the overall consensus ranking on this one and go with Byram. Thanks for the question. All right. If you guys have anything like segment-wise that you think you'd be interested in hearing on the next episode of the DPR show, give me a shout on Twitter. Let me know what it is you want to hear. Prospects, players, teams, fantasy strategies, draft strategies, you name it, I'll talk about it. Shoot me your questions. Tell me what you want to hear at DPR_show, at P Harling. Thanks for listening. Cheers.